Mr Speaker.
Richard Prosser.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Pleased to rise and take a third final call on this Geographical Indications Wines and Spirits Registration Amendment Bill. Mr Speaker, New Zealand First will not be voting for this bill, despite the fact that we acknowledge the need for it, despite the fact that we agree with almost everything in it. It's a good bill in almost all regards, and is certainly a necessary bill, almost all regards, and certainly a necessary bill in terms of what it does, indeed what it needs to do for the wine industry and for New Zealand's trade in general. And Mr Speaker, other speakers have made mention of the value in registered geographic identifiers for other products, cheese, honey, red meat and so forth, as Damien O'Connor and other speakers on the other side have said. Other primary exports that could benefit from being linked, certainly with New Zealand, taking advantage of brand New Zealand, but also going beyond that and being associated with particular regional flavours. And I agree with the Chair of the Primary Production Committee that that is something that the House will almost certainly come to consider in hopefully not too many years from now, but that's a discussion for a different day. This bill concerns the wine industry, and being a winemaker and viticulturist by trade, Mr Speaker, it's something that I have a particular attachment to. I have to say, as members will acknowledge, I think that New Zealand wines are amongst the best in the world, if not the best in the world. And certainly in terms of two of our flagship varieties, they being Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc being one of them, and Central Otago Pinot Noir, they're arguably the best in their classes in the world and acknowledged as being such by recognised experts. There are reasons for this, obviously, and they go to the heart of what this bill is about. Marlborough has comparable soils and climate to the Loire Valley in France, which is the home of Sauvignon Blanc, and that coupled with a perhaps better climate. And something else, Mr Speaker, that there's a French word, terroir, for which there's no direct English translation, but it kind of means the spirit of the land. It's the combination of the soils, the climate, and something intangible that imparts itself to the wine that people come to recognise with some sense, I guess, beyond the physical senses. So, and that really is the essence of what this regional identifier gets to. There are one place in the world can create a wine that has a certain terroir, and that is what this is about. I honestly seem to recall a number of years ago, I think it was an Argentinian wine company attempting to market what they called a Marlborough-style Sauvignon Blanc. And it's this very situation that this bill is attempting to overcome. And in fact, it may well have been the genesis of the original bill back in 2006, Mr Speaker. And likewise, the very best Pinot Noir in the world is grown in Central Otago, and more particularly in the Alexandra Basin and on the Bendigo Loop Road. Though it's fair to say that Waipara is catching up, as some of the vines have now got some proper age under their belts and starting to mature a little. So these names need to be protected, and these geographic identifiers that link unrivalled quality with particular places need to be recognised and protected, and that's for the good of the industry and the good of New Zealand Inc. as a whole. So we need to provide this protection, Mr Speaker. We need to be able to say to our trading partners that we will recognise their unique geographic identifiers as well, and respect those names and recognise and respect the intellectual property and the ownership and the investment that they have in it. And other governments and other jurisdictions will reciprocate that, Mr Speaker. So this is an important bill, and the issues it addresses are important, and that is why it's very frustrating that we have had to pull our support because of the refusal on the part of the government to remove from it the one clause that makes it untenable, the one completely unnecessary clause that gives special status and favourable treatment to Maori. Mr Speaker, New Zealand First has argued through the latter stages of this bill against the inclusion of special recognition and special concern for whether or not Maori are going to take offence, and a special advisory body that needs to be consulted, and that won't be free, Mr Speaker. You can bet the vineyard on that. That will come at a cost to wines and spirit makers, and it will introduce another delay, and both these things are completely unnecessary and completely unjustifiable. And we just simply cannot let that go unchallenged, Mr Speaker. New Zealand First can't sit by and say nothing while this rampantly PC national government enacts yet another piece of racially biased legislation. There is no requirement for any kind of special procedure to determine whether or not a proposed geographical indicator for a wine or spirit is or could be offensive to anyone other than Maori. The bill says a significant section of community including Maori. Well, of course, a significant section of the community would include Maori, Mr Speaker, and it would include women, and it would include superannuitants, and the disabled, and cat lovers, and left-handed people, and any other significant section of society that you care to name. And of course, Maori would be sizeably represented in any of those particular designations, because they're a significant part of, guess what, the whole of New Zealand society. But the bill doesn't make any special reference to any of these other groups, Mr Speaker. It doesn't provide special recognition for people of Scottish ancestry or Dutch or Samoan or anything else. But it does take another step towards the creation of two separate societies here in New Zealand, Mr Speaker. It does reinforce the National Party's desire to appease a few Maori separatists, people who seek to divide this nation, to create division where there should be none. And I have no doubt that the clauses in the bill solely to placate the racially based Maori Party on whose votes this government depends. They appear quite happy to sell out any principle at all in return for the guarantee of staying in power, Mr Speaker, and that is a sad thing for the wine industry and for this bill. The clause is neither necessary nor useful. In fact, it's the antithesis of those things. And incorporating in this bill, actually, the government has hijacked what in other ways is a very useful and necessary piece of legislation. We offered a compromise, Mr Speaker. New Zealand First offered a compromise in the form of a Geographic Board instead of a special Maori Advisory Committee, which could be consulted to see if a proposed name for a geographic wine region might be offensive to anyone. And the Geographic Board does, after all, deal with place names, and essentially this bill is about place names of places. But the Minister said that wouldn't be appropriate, and frankly, Mr Speaker, I struggle to think of a situation where it would be more appropriate to have the Geographic Place Names Board involved than in a bill that deals with geographic place names. But the bill will pass, Mr Speaker, because the government has the numbers. And I'm glad that the wine industry and New Zealand's trade I'm glad that the wine industry and New Zealand's trade will benefit from it. I am sorry that it will cost them time and money for a part of the process that is counterproductive and completely unnecessary. But I am deeply saddened that Maori are patronised and insulted by the inclusion of Clause 21B, and I'm deeply disappointed that the National Government has chosen to use it as an excuse to cynically advance the separation and division of races in this country. We're meant to be one people, Mr Speaker, one country, New Zealanders, all of us, with one law for all. But this bill contains two laws, Mr Speaker, one law for Maori and one for everybody else. In other ways, this bill is perfectly acceptable. In this one way, it is utterly unacceptable. New Zealand First stands for one law for everybody, and for that reason, Mr Speaker, we cannot support this bill. Thank you.